When the phone rang that morning, I was pruning the bougainvillea that framed the front porch of my little San Diego bungalow. The Pacific breeze carried the salt of the ocean, the same scent that had anchored me through years of widowhood. Seeing Amelia's name light up my screen should have filled me with joy. Instead, I hesitated. It had been months since she'd called me without Daniel's shadow lurking somewhere behind her words. "Hi, Mom," she said flatly, as though we were business acquaintances. "Sweetheart," I answered, forcing warmth into my voice. "I was just wondering when the big day is. I'll need to arrange time off." A pause, then words that cut deeper than any scalpel I ever held during my decades as a nurse. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. Just a small ceremony in Los Angeles. Only people who really matter." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Only people who matter. I had raised her alone after her father Richard's death. I'd worked double shifts at Scripps Hospital so she could attend private school. Every holiday, every scraped knee, every triumph, it had been me. And now I didn't matter. I steadied my voice. "I see. Well, congratulations." "Thanks," she continued, her tone lighter, almost rehearsed. "Daniel and I thought it would be better this way, less stressful. But we do need one thing from you. Can you send us the keys to the beach house? Daniel says it would be perfect for our honeymoon. He's always wanted to see La Jolla in the fall." There it was, the real reason for the call. Not to share her joy, not to invite me into this milestone, but to claim the one place still tethering us together. The La Jolla beach house, my sanctuary. Bought with the last of Richard's insurance money, it had been our summer escape for 20 years. Amelia learned to swim in those waves, roasted marshmallows on that sand, and once declared, barefoot at 12 years old, "Mom, I'm going to get married right here someday." Now she wanted it handed over like a hotel reservation. I gripped the phone tighter. "Of course, sweetheart, I'll make sure you get the keys." She thanked me quickly, then hung up. No details about the wedding, no mention of a dress, a cake, or even a photograph, just the demand for my house. I stood on my porch, the shears heavy in my hand, staring out at the restless line of the horizon. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. But as the waves rolled steady against the shore, so did a thought. If Daniel believed he could charm his way into my daughter's life and steal the one thing she and I loved most, he had underestimated me. This wasn't the beginning of their honeymoon. It was the beginning of my plan. 2 years earlier, when Amelia first brought Daniel to dinner, I remember setting the table in my San Diego townhouse with my grandmother's china. Amelia had asked me to make my lasagna, the dish she'd begged for since she was a girl. She wanted everything to be perfect, and I wanted that for her too. After years of hearing about heartbreaks and dead-end boyfriends, she finally sounded truly happy. Daniel arrived in a tailored navy suit, holding a dozen roses like he was stepping out of a commercial. His smile was wide, polished, and so very practiced. "Mrs. Carter, what an honor," he said, handing me the flowers. "Amelia always told me her mom was extraordinary." He asked questions about my decades as a nurse, leaning in like my stories were fascinating. He complimented the lasagna, insisted on helping clear the table, and even rolled up his sleeves to wash dishes. To anyone else, he was the image of a perfect gentleman, but I had lived long enough to recognize when someone was performing. What unsettled me wasn't his politeness, it was his interest in things that had nothing to do with Amelia. 3 separate times during dinner, he brought up my La Jolla beach house. "So Amelia says you've owned the beach place for 20 years, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. "That must be incredible property value, right on the Pacific. Do you rent it out?" "Ever thought of selling?" I smiled politely. "It's not for sale. That house holds every memory Amelia and I made after Richard passed." "Of course," he replied quickly, flashing that rehearsed grin. Family history is priceless. But his eyes lingered just a little too long, as if calculating numbers only he could see. After dinner, as he hugged me goodbye, he said, "Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter. You must be so proud." The words should have warmed me, but they rang hollow. It felt like flattery chosen from a script. That night while I was loading the dishwasher, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that Daniel's compliments weren't about Amelia at all. They were about positioning himself. The next morning, I called my sister Margaret, who lived in Arizona. "He's very interested in the beach house," I told her cautiously. She laughed. "That's sweet, Helen. It means he wants to be part of the family, to share in your traditions. Don't overthink it." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe my daughter had finally found someone who cherished her. But as I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the jacaranda trees blooming purple on my street, I remembered Richard, my late husband, how he had that same easy charm, that same ability to make you feel special until the moment you weren't useful anymore. And though Amelia's smile that night was the brightest I had seen in years, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Because sometimes perfection is the most dangerous mask of all. In the months that followed that dinner, Daniel's presence in Amelia's life grew like an invasive vine. At first, it was subtle. She still called me during her lunch breaks, still dropped by the beach house on weekends. But little by little, those habits withered. "Daniel thinks I should focus more on us," she explained one afternoon, when I asked why she'd stopped calling so often. Her voice carried that tone people use when they're repeating something they've been coached to believe. "He says successful couples prioritize each other. You understand, right, Mom?" I wanted to argue, but instead I forced a smile she couldn't see you through the phone. "Of course, sweetheart. If you're happy, I'm happy." But I wasn't happy. I was watching the daughter I had raised, the girl who once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, slowly drift into someone else's orbit. The proof came 6 months later. I was drinking my morning coffee, scrolling half awake through Facebook, when I saw it, a photo of Amelia's left hand, a sparkling diamond catching the sunlight. The caption read, "He asked, I said yes. Can't wait to start forever with you." 53 likes, dozens of comments from friends and coworkers, not one asking where her mother was, because they all assumed I already knew. But I didn't. My coffee went cold in my hand as I stared at the image. My daughter was engaged, and I was finding out with strangers. I called her immediately. She answered breathlessly, excitement spilling through the line. "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. It just happened last night, and we were so caught up in the moment. Daniel surprised me at our favorite restaurant. Then we went back to his place and called his parents. It got so late, and I was going to call you this morning. I swear, my heart was breaking, but I forced warmth into my voice. Congratulations, sweetheart. Tell me everything." And she did. She gushed about the proposal, the ring, the way Daniel's parents had instantly started planning an engagement party at their country club. "When's the engagement party?" I asked carefully. A pause. Then, "Next Saturday. It's just immediate family and close friends." "Should I drive up Friday night?" Silence. Then her voice, tight. "Mom, about that. Daniel's family has very specific ideas. His mother is traditional. She's planning everything. It's really for his side." I felt something cold sink into my stomach. "And what do you think, Amelia?" "I think Daniel knows his family better than I do. I want to start on the right foot with them. You understand, right?" I swallowed hard. Of course. But as I set down the phone, my hands trembled. My only daughter had been engaged without me. She was already building a life where I was just a spectator. And deep inside, I feared this was only the beginning of losing her. 3 months after the engagement announcement, Amelia called me one evening while I was reorganizing linens in the hall closet. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of quiet routine I cherished in my retirement. I answered, expecting some wedding update, maybe even an olive branch. Instead, her words would leave me frozen in place. "Mom," she began cautiously, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be cool about it." My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever followed that sentence. "What is it, sweetheart?" "It's about the beach house." I clutched a folded quilt to my chest. "What about it?" "Well, Daniel says he doesn't feel completely comfortable there. He feels like it's not really ours, you know, like he's under your microscope every time we visit. And I guess I've always assumed I'd inherit it anyway." So maybe it's time to just sign it over. For a moment, the hallway spun. That house was more than property. It was memory and survival, the last tangible piece of Richard's legacy. It was where Amelia learned to swim, where she roasted marshmallows at 12 years old, and declared she would get married barefoot on that sand one day. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice steady. Amelia, that house has been in our family for 20 years. It's where you and I built our lives after your father passed. It's not just a vacation spot. It's home. I know, Mom, I do. But Daniel feels like it puts pressure on our relationship, like he can never fully relax there, knowing it's yours. He wants us to have our own special places, without feeling indebted. Without feeling indebted. The words stung like seawater in an open wound. I had never asked Daniel for a thing, never scrutinized his presence in that house. But now he was planting seeds in Amelia's mind, twisting our memories into burdens. I tried to soften my tone. Sweetheart, I'm not asking you to give me anything. I'm offering you the space we've always shared. Her voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. I know, but maybe it's healthier if we find somewhere new, somewhere just for us. That was when I realized what Daniel was doing. He wasn't simply cutting me out of wedding planning or family gatherings. He was dismantling the very foundation of my bond with my daughter, brick by brick, until the only thing left standing between us was his voice. When we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of Amelia and me on that very beach, her hair wild from the wind, my arms wrapped tight around her. She had once looked at me like I was her whole world. Now she was asking me to surrender it, and though I told her I would think about it, deep inside, something steeled in me. If Daniel wanted my beach house, he would soon learn it came with more history than he could ever handle. After that call, I knew I couldn't just sit back and hope for the best. Daniel wasn't going to stop at wedding guest lists or holiday plans. He wanted the beach house, the inheritance, and, if I wasn't careful, my daughter's independence too. So I did what every mother does when cornered. I fought back quietly. I called a local private investigator, an old colleague of Richard's brother, who had transitioned into private work after leaving the San Diego police force. His name was Victor. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown, where the hum of tourists blended with the ocean breeze. I need you to look into my future son-in-law, I said, sliding a photo of Daniel across the table. I can't explain it, but something in my bones tells me he isn't who he says he is. Victor studied the photo, then nodded. Leave it with me. 1 week later, he called me back. His voice carried the heaviness of bad news. Helen, you were right to worry. We met again, this time in his office, where files lay stacked in careful order. He pushed a folder toward me. Inside were records, marriage licenses that never led to weddings, financial reports, and even a few old police notes. Daniel had been engaged twice before, once to Emma Harrison, the daughter of a wealthy restaurant chain owner. Another time to Sarah Blake, whose family controlled several real estate properties along the California coast. In both cases, Daniel had isolated them from their families, whispered about boundaries, then tried to gain access to their assets. Both engagements ended abruptly, one after Emma's father discovered Daniel's gambling debts, the other when Sarah's brothers confronted him about suspicious withdrawals from her trust fund. But what made my stomach truly twist was deeper in the folder. Newspaper clippings from the late 1980s, a failed business partnership. The name leapt out at me like a ghost. Morrison. Daniel's grandfather? I asked. Victor nodded. William Morrison. He and your late husband Richard were once partners in a shopping center development project here in Southern California. Morrison embezzled millions from their joint accounts, vanished to Florida, and left Richard bankrupt. From what I found, your husband spent years in legal battles trying to recover the money. My hands trembled as I turned the yellowed pages. Richard had never told me the full story. He'd only said a business partner betrayed him before his health declined. I'd thought it was just another failed deal. But here was the truth. Morrison had destroyed him. And now his grandson is trying to finish the job, I whispered. Victor's eyes were steady. Daniel has been living off money funneled through accounts tied to Morrison's old theft, offshore accounts. He's been using those funds for years. I sat back, my chest tight. This wasn't just about Amelia's future. It was about Richard's past, the wound that had never healed. Daniel wasn't simply a manipulator. He was a predator with a family legacy of deceit, and he had chosen my daughter as his next mark. 3 days after Amelia's call, demanding the beach house keys, I knew what I had to do. Daniel thought I would roll over, hand him the property, and disappear quietly into the background. He believed I was just another aging mother, too sentimental to fight back, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. I spent 72 hours assembling what I came to call my wedding gift. At my kitchen table, I laid out documents Victor had provided, marriage licenses that ended in scandal, police reports, and bank transfers linking Daniel to offshore accounts. I added old newspaper clippings about William Morrison, the grandfather who had swindled my late husband, and copies of Richard's estate records showing Amelia as the rightful heir. Then I wrote a short note on crisp stationery. Every new husband should know his wife's family history. Congratulations on your marriage. With love, Helen. I slid everything into a leather portfolio, wrapped it in silver paper, and tied it with a white bow. It looked elegant, festive, like something plucked from a wedding registry. Friday morning, I drove downtown to Amelia and Daniel's apartment in San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter. Tourists bustled along the sidewalks, never guessing that in my hands, I carried the unraveling of a carefully crafted con. I set the gift outside their door, rang the bell, and walked away without waiting. By 2:17 that afternoon, the call came. The screen lit up with Amelia's number, but when I answered, it was Daniel's voice, raw and unhinged. "What the hell is wrong with you, you crazy old witch? How dare you send us this garbage?" I set my teacup down gently. "Hello, Daniel. I take it you opened your wedding gift. This isn't funny. This is harassment. I'm calling the police." His words tumbled fast, desperate. I let a smile creep into my voice. "Report me then. Tell them your mother-in-law gave you a gift filled with public records and archived newspaper articles. I'm sure they'll be fascinated." In the background, I heard Amelia's voice trembling. "Trevor, calm down. Let me talk to her." But Daniel wouldn't relent. "She's insane. She's trying to ruin us." I spoke evenly, each word deliberate. "No, Daniel. I'm simply giving you the truth. Did you enjoy reading about your grandfather's embezzlement? About how he destroyed Richard's life? Or perhaps you preferred the bank records showing you've been living off stolen money for years?" Silence. Then for the first time, fear seeped into his voice. "You're lying." "I never lie," I said softly. "I was a nurse. We are trained to be precise about facts, but don't take my word for it. Your grandfather's lawyer in Miami remembers you well. His name is Rodriguez. He's expecting your call." In the distance, I heard Amelia whisper, broken, "Daniel, what is she talking about?" I hung up without waiting for an answer. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on my chest eased, because I knew the seed of doubt had finally been planted. The next 2 days were restless ones. I barely slept, replaying Daniel's voice in my head, first full of rage, then dripping with fear. But the sound I couldn't shake was Amelia's, breaking as she whispered, "Daniel, what is she talking about?" For the first time, my daughter had asked the right question. On Sunday morning, I found her sitting on my porch steps in La Jolla. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red, her posture small like she'd folded into herself. She didn't even greet me. She just said, "Tell me everything." Over coffee at the same kitchen table, where she'd once done her math homework, I laid it all out. Daniel's history, his broken engagements, his grandfather's crimes, and the money that had been stolen from her father's estate. I expected her to argue, maybe defend him. Instead, she pulled a manila folder from her purse. "I found these," she said, spreading out printouts of emails. He left his laptop open. "He's been corresponding with a man named Marcus Webb about accessing Morrison inheritance accounts. The emails go back 2 years, long before I even met him. Mom, he researched me. He knew about Dad, about the beach house. Meeting him wasn't an accident. Her voice cracked, but her eyes hardened. I called one of his ex-fiancées, Emma. She told me everything. How he isolated her, tried to get control of her accounts, then vanished when her father hired a detective. And she put me in touch with another woman, Sarah. Same story, Mom, word for word. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. No, she said firmly, brushing her tears away. Don't apologize. I believed him over you. I pushed you away, but now I'm going to destroy him. And I need your help. For the first time in 2 years, my daughter's fire was back. The next morning, Amelia met with an estate attorney who confirmed she had legal claim to millions Morrison had stolen from Richard. But there was more. Because Daniel had been actively accessing those funds, he could be charged with money laundering and conspiracy. That afternoon, Amelia and I sat in a conference room with Agent Elena Ruiz from the FBI's San Diego office. We've been tracking Daniel Morrison for months, she explained. Your evidence fills in the missing pieces. If you're willing, we can set up a controlled operation. Amelia didn't hesitate. I'll do it. Friday evening, Daniel returned, bouquet of roses in hand, eyes soft with manufactured regret. I made mistakes, he crooned, but we can start fresh. I love you, Amelia. What he didn't know was that microphones hid in the lamps, and a small wire lay beneath Amelia's blouse. At 9:31 p.m., he leaned close, whispering, all I need is access to your accounts. Once that money moves, it's ours forever. Her voice was steady. So you admit you married me for the inheritance? Yes, he said, and you should be grateful. The door burst open. Agents stormed in, their voices sharp. FBI, hands where we can see them. Daniel's mask cracked in an instant, his perfect smile collapsing into raw panic as they cuffed him in front of the woman he thought he had conquered. And I, watching from the safe distance Agent Ruiz allowed, felt the tide finally turn. The news hit San Diego by Monday morning. Headlines splashed across the Union Tribune. Local man arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. They didn't name Amelia, but Daniel's mugshot, once charming, now hollow, stared out from every screen. The trial began 6 weeks later. Amelia stood in the same courthouse where I'd once fought for guardianship papers after Richard's death. Now she faced the man who had tried to erase her mother from her life. She testified with strength I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She spoke of how Daniel had isolated her, convinced her I was holding her back, how he'd chipped away at every bond she had. He didn't just steal money, she told the jury, her voice steady. He tried to steal my family, my history, and the trust I had in myself. 2 other women, Emma and Sarah, joined her. Together, they painted a picture of a predator who had refined his scheme across years, always targeting successful women with family assets. When Amelia finished, the courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on her. She had turned her pain into undeniable truth. Daniel's defense tried to paint him as reckless, not criminal. But the evidence, bank records, offshore accounts, and his own recorded confession, crushed that argument. The jury deliberated for barely 3 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge's gavel echoed through the chamber. 12 years in federal prison, full restitution to the victims, and the accounts Daniel had siphoned would be redirected back to their rightful heirs. For Amelia, it meant nearly $4 million from her father's stolen estate. When we left the courthouse, Amelia slipped her hand into mine. For the first time in years, it felt like my daughter was truly with me again. That evening, we sat on the porch of the La Jolla Beach House. The Pacific stretched wide and endless before us. We flipped through old photo albums, Amelia laughing through tears at sunburnt noses and sandcastles lopsided from the tide. Mom, she said softly, I'm so sorry for everything I let him convince me of. I shut you out when you were the only one fighting for me. I wrapped my arm around her. You were manipulated by an expert liar, but you came back. That's what matters. She nodded, her eyes fierce again. Next time I walk down an aisle, it'll be barefoot in this sand, with someone who loves you as much as they love me. As the waves rolled steady against the shore, I felt something in me finally release, because in the end, truth had been the gift that saved my daughter. And once truth is unwrapped, it can never be taken back.